And 8 years later, which we'll get to, it was a problem again, because think about it. We're talking with Hank Molle here in the Mike Name podcast. So glad that Hank is here. He's really telling so many great stories. I'm glad that him and I are talking, that you, the audience, can hear these great stories as well. That day, I mean, you have three agencies that work here. The Port Authority Police has jurisdiction over this complex. Then there's the NYPD. Then there's the FDNY. They can't cross communicate, that day. That was among the major problems as well, because you have three very important agencies. And here the Port Authority Police is unique because they know the building, they know the area better than anybody, having jurisdiction over it. And you can't get in touch with them. You can't get in touch with each other. And listen, it's a miracle that only 6 people got killed. And of course, it's 6 lives too many. As we know, life is a sacred thing. But so many more could have died just because you don't know where this person is or that person is. And you have people coming down the stairwells and nobody, it's all guesswork at that point. And that's a frightening thing, to have to even try to work through. And he mentioned Kevin Shea, did Hank Molle. So there's an episode for my people that aren't familiar with Getting Salty, type in Kevin Shea FDNY on YouTube and you'll see his podcast episode. Great guy, very humble man, as Hank can attest to. And his story of survival and how he got injured that day is terrifying. It's really a miracle that he survived such a frightening fall. So accelerating ahead and that last note on that, I will say 1993, as I said to my people from the bomb squad that I've had on the show, that changed the game, because this is at a time when terrorism, domestic or foreign, didn't really come to mind. This is pre-Tim McVeigh. Obviously, this is pre-9/11. So 1993 definitely got a lot of people on their toes. So let's move ahead to 1998. And that is when Commissioner Von Essen decides that he wants to form the Special Operations Command, which is so unique to me in its operation. I have that timetable right. It was 98, right? That they were formed officially.
I'm not 100% sure. 98 is when the new squads were formed. Mm-hmm. Prior to that, like when I first got to Rescue 1, there was no Special Operations Command. We were like, Rescue 1 was in the 9th Battalion. Rescue 2 was in, I think, like maybe the 5-7 Battalion or the 3. Wherever your company lied, you were in the same battalion as what the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd companies were. Then they realized that we need to do some type of coordination and let the chiefs know what the special ops companies are capable of doing. So they started what was called 13 David. And what that was, it was just a Suburban, and it had a rescue captain, and any like multiple alarm or special operation, 13 David would respond to. And they would be there kind of like a liaison. It was like a rescue liaison to let the chiefs know, hey, this is what you got here. We can do this and this for you. That down the road transpired into SOC, Special Operations Command. Now, that might have been formed before the new squads actually came into existence. So the number that you have now, again, I'm not sure. My best judgment was, I think it was formed before the squads were in existence. But 98 is actually when they got the federal money to use, I think, for more hazmat and for like weapons of mass destruction and mass casualties. So they were going to form the 5 new squads, and part of their duties, instead of like what the rescues do in the scuba, like where I did in Rescue 1, the squads would not do scuba, but they would do hazmat. So, and they were given a second piece. So you had your engine, and then you had a second piece, which back then we called a bread truck, which had all the hazmat stuff in it. Since then, they've got nicer rigs and better rigs, but that's when, in its incipient stages, that's what it was, and that's when it started in 98.
And those rigs, I Googling it, those old school Mac rigs, man, they were a thing of beauty. Those are such cool photos of those rigs that you guys used to drive. And of course, the ones now are great too. But those, I love, as somebody that loves throwbacks, that really is a great rig. And so Squad 288, I know for a fact, was formed in 1998 out in Maspeth, Queens. And it's hard to believe, in a couple of years, 2023, which we're halfway through this year, it's going to celebrate a quarter century of being around and serving the people of Queens, which is pretty cool. So,
Yeah.
formulating Squad 288, you go there, you have obviously by this point, you joined the department in 1979, so 19 years of experience. You got guys there with a little bit of experience too, but Kevin Kugler has referred to you as his senior guy in Squad 288. Now you're in a position where you could teach people the same way guys taught you. So what were the lessons that you wanted to show guys, even though they had a little bit of experience, as you guys embarked on this new exciting chapter?
Well, I was fortunate, like I say, first to get there. The captain, Dennis Murphy, who's a tremendous guy. Again, tremendous background, with Ladder 111 and Rescue 2, and he was a lieutenant and 113 or 113 or 249, and then 176. Then he became captain, and he was asked to be one of the captains. So he was going to be the captain of Squad 288. And Dennis and I knew each other because we were both chiefs instructors at the Nassau County Fire Service Academy. So we were friendly. And at that point, I had left Rescue 1, and I was in Ladder 175. And the reason being, because generally when you get to a rescue and you're a seated chauffeur, you don't leave unless you retire, you're injured, or you get promoted. And that was kind of what my thought process too. But like anything, just like any great sports team, or when there's a certain point where there's a great chemistry amongst everybody, from the bosses to the guys, and you're at the top of your game. And that's how it was for 10 and a half years for me. Unfortunately, things happen, like my captain, Brian O'Flaherty, another, great fireman, great captain. He had become the uniform fire officers rep for captains. So now he was out of the company. So now we were getting these constant rotating, covering captains in for a while. Then one of the lieutenants, he went out, he had a heart attack. So he went out. Another lieutenant got injured, and then another lieutenant retired. So now all of the regular officers are gone. So we had 4 different officers, and then captains have the opportunity to bring guys in who they want. And the different captains that were there had different theories than Captain O'Flaherty did. So we were getting good firemen. I mean, they were good guys, good firemen and everything, but just a different way of operating. And for me, it was, it had lost some of the things that made me, love it the way I did. So I had to reach a point where I was either going to say, I'm going to conform to the way they're operating now, or I'm going to leave. And so at that point, I chose to leave, and there were no squads. So I was like, well, you know what? I really like my time in Brooklyn. I could go back to 132, but when I talked to the guys there, they were like, you know what? It's never the same. It's not the same now as when you left. We'd love to have you back, but we don't want you to be disappointed. And at that point, another one of my buddies who ended up getting killed on 9/11, but he was a chief at that point, and he told me, listen, go to 175, because they were in East New York. It was a good commute from where I lived on Long Island. They were a tiller rig, which I had been, Freeport Truck is a tiller rig. And he said, they're going through a lot of fires. So, he said, you'll enjoy it. So I had enough time and points and stuff. I put my paperwork in, and I went to 175. I got there. It was a great place. A lot of young guys, a few senior guys. But, I went in there with the attitude that I'm the new guy here, so I was the first guy in the sink and sweeping the floors and whatever. But what was good was that the young guys also appreciated my time and where I had worked. So whenever I decided, I would do a lot of informal stuff. Like I'd say, what do you want to drill on today? Or I'd say, let's drill on this. So it's, and it would be stuff that maybe they didn't drill on that often. Maybe it was knots, or maybe it was lowering the Stokes basket. But they appreciated that, and I appreciated doing it. But what I found was, when you've spent almost 12 years in a rescue company responding to everything in the borough, and you're trained to do that, and now all of a sudden you're sitting in a truck company again, and you go into fires, but right now there's a fire that's over there and you're not going to that. Whereas if you were in the rescue, you'd be going. So I was kind of like chomping at the bit. So when they announced the formation of the squads, I thought, you know what, this may be a good opportunity for me. So, I had reached out to, a few of the captains had reached out to me, which was nice because it felt that my career meant something. And these captains were looking, every captain wanted to try to find a few senior guys because they knew they were going to have all these young guys that needed to be mentored. So, I was fortunate that the 5 captains reached out to me. And like I said, I felt that, to me, that validated my career for me. That, okay, you know what, I guess you did pretty good because these guys are reaching out. And I liked every one of the captains. I was friendly with all of them. But I chose 288 because they were starting a company with basically only one guy was remaining in the company from Engine 288. He was a young guy. A lot of the other places, like half the guys were staying. And to me, I just thought that might be a little bit of a recipe for some hard times, because you got guys that this was their company. Now all of a sudden it's becoming a squad. You got 12 new guys coming in, and it's like, well, they want to do things one way. No, this is the way we've done it for the past 50 years. And there's going to be some headbutting there. And, I felt I already had my, issues and disagreements when I left Rescue 1. With 19 years on the job, I wasn't looking to get into any, like chesty, this is my way or no way or anything. I just, I was looking for a good fit. So 288, knowing Dennis was going to be the captain. Timmy Kelly, who I was a fireman with in Rescue 1, was going to be one of the lieutenants. Vinny Ungaro, God rest his soul, died of a 9/11 cancer. But I knew Vinny from back in college days. So, 3 of the 4 officers I was friendly with, and I knew that I was going to go in there and be the senior man of the company, which is basically like you're given carte blanche to set the mold on a lot of things. So that's why I chose 288. And for me, it was the right decision. I had guys like Kevin and Louie and all these young guys that they were like sponges. Their minds were like sponges. All they wanted to do was learn. And even though they had a couple of years on the job, most of them didn't come from really busy places. So they didn't have a lot of fire duty. But the fact that they wanted to go to a place like a squad meant that, hey, they're not getting any extra money back then. We never got any extra money for being in special ops. Now you get specialization pay. But you had to really have a love for the job to want to do more stuff and not get any more money for it. So that's the kind of guys that, attracted the squads, were attracted to the squads. So for me, they had the right attitude and they wanted to learn. And at that point, I enjoyed being able to pass my experience and my knowledge on that I got from guys that were twice the fireman I was. But that's the way the fire service works, is where, the guys that want to learn and the guys that want to pass it on. And so for me, that's why I went to the squad, because it fit, it checked the box for that. It checked the box for being in special ops. So I didn't have the whole borough of Queens, but we had half the borough of Queens. And even with that, you still ended up, like many times we'd end up going into Manhattan because we get right on the LIE to the Midtown Tunnel. So, we went to fires and stuff in Manhattan. We went to the Bronx. So it checked all the boxes. And for me, it was a great place to end my career. I didn't expect it to end as quickly as it did. Unfortunately, after 9/11, I had some lung issues that they picked up, and then they put me out of the job. I would have liked to have done more time. But you know what? There's a lot of the guys that aren't here. So I have to, count my blessings that at least I'm still here.
Absolutely. A few more things I want to hit on with you because you've been so generous with your time and I don't want to keep you too long. I guess that transitions into that day. I do want to show some footage of the members of Squad 288 and Mr. Brian Sweeney from Rescue 1, who was covering that day, I believe, in Squad 288. This is for my audience. This is not graphic. I would never show anything graphic. Of course, I don't do that. But this is portraits of heroes as they walk towards this danger with no regard for their own safety, but rather for the safety of others. And I want my audience to see this. This is from the documentary 102 Minutes That Changed America, raw footage from the streets of New York City that fateful morning. Here are the members of Squad 288 and one member from Rescue 1 walking towards this.
Fielcom, number 1 World Trade Center, the 103 floor, southwest corner and northwest corner. Reported to be 100 people overcome at that location. Repeating, World Trade Center, 103rd floor, north corner. Reported to be 100 people in that location. Also, ladder 3 is reporting from the 35th floor going up on the stairwells. They got numerous injuries from burns occupied in the stairwells at this time. Fielcom received? Fielcom received.
True heroes right there. I'll let you take it away. Just take me through that day from your perspective.
Well, first of all, let me say one thing about the brothers you just saw. You have a mask on your back that gives you approximately 30 minutes of air, okay? If you saw, every one of them was carrying an extra bottle. Okay, now you're trained that when that vibro alert goes off, you get out of the building or out of the contaminated atmosphere. And that's your card out, okay? Type of guys that you have on the job, and especially in companies like that, they had their extra, they got off the rig bringing an extra bottle, knowing that, you know what, I'm going to be in an extended operation. I'm going to be up on the floors. And when that vibro alert goes off, I'm not going out to the street to get a new bottle. I'm changing my bottle wherever I am, and I'm immediately going back to work, doing what my assigned task is. And, so just, and people wouldn't realize that unless, and that's why I'm telling that, these are the type of guys they were. And these are the type of men that I had the honor and privilege of working with. So, as far as me, I got off that morning. And I actually had left, that night I had driven the SOC chief, John Moran. So I left, SOC relieves a little earlier. Their tours are a little different than in the firehouse. So I had gotten relieved, and plus that morning it was funny because if you remember back then, there was a Firestone tire recall. All the tires were found to be defective. So I had been leasing a Ford Explorer for my wife, and we had the car with the Firestone tires on it. And in October, we had plans to take the kids down to Disney, and we were driving. So they had given me an appointment of September 11th to go into Abel Ford in Rockville Center to have the tires switched out. So normally I would sit around and have the extra cup of coffee and break chops and everything, but I knew I had to get home to get I had my ghetto cruiser. I was going to go home, get that car and bring it into Abel Ford to get the tires changed. So I was out the door and on my way. And I'm back on Long Island, and I'm listening. I didn't have the radio on at that point. The phone rang, and at the time it was my brother-in-law, John, said, "Did you hear what happened?" I said, "No, what?" It was a plane went into the Trade Center. So at first I'm thinking, it's probably like the Corey Lytle thing, maybe a little Cessna or something, not unheard of in Manhattan, between the helicopter crashes and the small plane. I said, "What kind of plane?" He goes, "They don't know yet." So I pulled over, and then I looked back towards the city. Now that day was a crystal clear blue September sky, and the amount of smoke that was billowing up, I was like, that had to be like a big plane, a commercial airliner. So immediately I thought my mind went back to the World Trade Center bombing. And the reason it did, and this is a story that needs to be told. On that day of the 93 bombing, we had a fellow in Rescue 1 by the name of Ronnie Bucca. And Ronnie had gotten hurt at a second alarm. The day I was working, we actually had 6 men that day. We had an extra man in Rescue 1. Mm-hmm. Ronnie had the OV position, and a mayday was given by the lieutenant in 35 truck that he was trapped. So Ronnie, being the OV, was going up the fire escape to try to get to, the apartment through the exterior, and we were going up through the interior to try to get to the where he was trapped. Ronnie encountered, I think it was on the 5th floor, one of the scissor gates we were talking about. So the way you attack a scissor gate is you take the fork end of your Halligan, you shove it in, you take the axe, you hold it, and you try to bang it down to the hinge side, because the gate has a flat metal bar that's screwed into the window jamb on the side. So you attack the hinge side, you try to pry it, because you'll never get the other side where the lock is. So you try to actually pull the screws out of the wood and back the gate off that way. So, Ronnie wasn't a big guy, but he was a tough guy. He'd been in the, I think he was an Army Ranger, and then he was in the Army in the intelligence battalion or whatever. Mm-hmm. So he's trying to force the gate, and he's got the Halligan in there, and he's pulling and pulling and pulling. All of a sudden, the gate popped, but when it did, he had put so much force behind it, he fell over the fire escape backwards. He went down 5 stories, and which would normally kill anybody.
That's why they called him the Flying Fireman.
Correct.
Yeah.
So on his way down, and we found this out later by talking to one of the building managers, like a month or 2 prior, they had just put new security lighting in the courtyard. And as part of it, to get from one part of the courtyard to the other, they put a piece of like 3/4 inch conduit across the alleyway opening, but it was about like 9 foot off the ground. So on his way down, Ronnie just happened to, he went down bottle first. The bottle hit the conduit, bent down and spun him around, and he hit the ground face first. So his knees hit, So next thing we hear is one of the other firemen, I guess, one of the other OVs that's urgent. There's a fireman fell. He's down in the courtyard. We're thinking, well, maybe, we're trying to contact Ronnie. We can't get him. So now we all converge down to the courtyard, and sure enough, it's Ronnie. We get to him, and it looks like both his legs are broken and backwards. But luckily that wasn't the case. What happened was, this was before we had bunker gear. So when he hit, the rubber boots had actually like partially come off and spun around. So his feet looked like they were backwards, but they weren't. It was just that the boots had like kind of, in the impact, had pulled down on his legs a little bit. But what had happened was he fractured both his kneecaps and he fractured his spine. So obviously he's out on medical leave, and that would be a career-ending injury for anybody. You could have got out with your 3/4 injury and called it a day. But again, kind of guys that, I had the privilege of working with, not Ronnie. He was going to rehab and get himself back into the firehouse. So he healed and he rehabbed, and he got back to the firehouse, I don't know, maybe a little over a year later. But I guess after fighting some fires and stuff, he realized that it had really taken a toll on his body, and he had studied to become a fire marshal, and he passed the test. So when his number came up, he took the fire marshal promotion and became a fire marshal. So he at that, I think at that point he was a fire marshal, but he had stopped in at Rescue 1 that afternoon. So when we got back to quarters, Ronnie was in the firehouse, and we're sitting at the table. I'm telling him about my frustration of the day, and we're waiting to hear back from Kevin and report on Kevin and everything. And he tells us, he says, listen, he says, nobody wants to listen to us. But at that point, he was still in the reserves in the military intelligence battalion, whatever that was. And with the fire marshals, he said, we've been trying to tell the powers to be that there's a group called Al Qaeda, and this is their MO, and they're coming to these shores. And if they hit a target and they don't accomplish what they tried to do, and in the case of the 93 bombing, they bombed the basement hoping that it would take the foundation out and lay the building over, and it didn't. He said, when they don't accomplish what they set out to do, they will come back when it's right for them and hit that target again. And those words always stuck in my mind. So I had those, those words in my head when I saw the smoke. So I immediately put like 10 wins on or something, and I'm listening, and they're giving these reports now. There's a commercial airliner hit. There's people trapped. So I knew immediately that there was going to be a recall. So I turned around and started heading back to the city. And as I'm heading back and I'm listening to the radio, then all of a sudden they get the second plane hits. So now we know we're under attack. The NYPD highway is shutting down all the roads. So I make it onto the, what is it? The Van Wyck? Not the Van Wyck. What's the one that goes around to 21st Avenue that goes up to the Triborough Bridge? That's how long I've been out of New York now. I'm having a brain.
I'm not a New Yorker, so I wouldn't know.
Grand Central. I guess it's the Grand Central.
Yeah.
And so I badge my way on, and I'm able to get on, and then I get off at 21st Avenue, and I make it to Roosevelt Island, which is where SOC Command was. And that's where I had left that morning. That's where the chiefs were. Everybody's out. But there's always a couple of spare rigs and stuff. So there's a spare chief's car, a Suburban. With that, another fellow shows up, Frankie Fee, who ended up, another Freeport truck guy who ended up in Rescue 1 after I had left. But he shows up, and then one other fellow shows up. I forget who it was. So we take the spare chief Suburban, and now we're heading down. So we come off the island, we get onto the 59th Street Bridge, we cross onto the FDR, and as we turn onto the FDR, we have the department radio on. All kinds of urgent. Now the second tower had just collapsed. So about 5 minutes later, we pull in and we get as close as we can, and no mask, because there's no mask in the spare rig, and but we have our turnout gear and some tools, and try to go to work. We know that there's got to be on any given working day there, we know there's 40,000 people in the towers. Luckily their timing was off because they hit the towers before everybody had gotten into work, so there wasn't as many people, or the number would have been worse. And now we know there's got to be brothers that are in there and sisters that are trapped. So I think we headed in off of West Street, and it was like surreal. It was, you went from this clear day to ashen gray, to where you had trouble breathing, you had cotton mouth, but it was okay. So what's your option? Say that this is too bad, I don't have a mask, and turn around and leave, or you're going to go to work and try to find people that are trapped. So it was option A wasn't even in the question. So we went to work. And I remember we were climbing over rubble, and we looked down through the rubble, and we could see lights flashing, down inside the rubble. And we're going down through this rubble. I mean, we're not talking, maybe we went down 6 feet, and we hit the top of a rig. And as we were able to work down, and there's a pair of bunker pants and boots that coming out from underneath the bottom of the rig. So it must have been the chauffeur of that rig. So we get down there, and maybe this guy's alive. But when we got down there, we realized that not only wasn't he alive, but the weight of the building coming down just crushed the rig. He must have went under the rig to dive to get away from all the falling debris, but the amount of weight just collapsed the rig on top of him, and he was crushed under there. So we couldn't do anything. We're helpless. It wasn't like you're gonna move a few things and get this brother out. It was like, what are we gonna do? There's no command. We had no radios, so you couldn't report it to anybody. So I think we tried to look for something that we could stick in the debris there to go back later to tell somebody that there was, somebody there. But there wasn't even anything you could find. It was just brick, and when I say brick, concrete and steel, and there wasn't anything there. So it was all right, well, we can't do anything there. We'll move on. And that's what we did. We moved on, and you kept trying to look for stuff. And then eventually you'd meet up with more guys, and you dug. But that first day, again, it was just like the 93 bombing, completely frustrating. It wasn't until a few hours into the operation, I remember meeting up with Chief Siegel, Bill Siegel, who had been a member of Rescue One, and now he was a chief in SOC. And he took command of a little sector, and we were working under him, and we worked through the night, moving rubble and trying to find people. And then finally, the next day, they ordered us off the pile and said, you have to stop and take a break. And like, we were refusing, but they like, at one point, look, there's no option here. You've been here too long. Don't worry, we're going to take you back. So we ended up going back to SOC that night. And, at that point, I remember, trying to call my family to let them know I was okay, but I was going to be staying in the city. And, I remember that second night was eerie because we went back to work that day, but then I think at that point they were giving us, I think it was 24 on and 24 off to start. Then it was like 12 on and 12 off, but whatever, second or third night in, it all kind of melts together. But I'm on the island with a couple of other guys, and your head's still spinning as to what's happened here and what's going on and who's missing, and there's all kinds of supplies now coming into SOC command. There was Carhartt was sending overalls, and boots were coming in from Wolverine and all kinds of stuff. But I remember, if you're familiar with Roosevelt Island, it's in the middle there underneath the 59th Street Bridge. And generally, if you're standing there, it's just so much ambient noise between the cars over the 59th Street Bridge and the cars going across on the FDR Drive and this boat traffic and everything. And we're there, and you're at the water's edge, and the water's rushing by, and there's nothing. Every once in a while, there's a siren going down the FDR Drive or something, but there's no traffic, no cars, no nothing. And then, like, all of a sudden, you hear like whatever it was, an F-16 overhead, doing a round, and it was just surreal. And that was my first day, a day of frustration and not being able to do anything until a command structure was set up. And then it was such a big site. The fire department set it up into 4 different quadrants, and there was a chief in charge of each quadrant. And then you would, you'd take your rig, and then you would drive down to where you were assigned. And, your chief would give you your assignment for that day, and you would dig or work or whatever in that, in that quadrant. I remember, and then I'm going to, finish with the WTC bombing, but I don't remember, but it was maybe 3 or 4 days into it. I'm working on, again, off of West Street, and we're tunneling. And it wasn't. I guess you got to call it tunneling, because we have debris and everything over our heads, but we're working. And all of a sudden, I hear one of the guys I knew a guy from Rescue One calling me, because he knew I was working in the area, and he knew that I had been in Rescue One for many years, and he had come upon a body, and it happened to be Joe Angelini, and but he wasn't sure. He hadn't worked with Joe, and he called me over, and I went over there and what was exposed, and saw that it was Joe, and confirmed that it was Joe. And then we ended up finished digging Joe out, and we was able to get him. I mean, he had passed, but at least we were able to find him for his family. And he was there because his son was in Fort Truck, and his son was working that day, and his son also got killed on that day. So it was a tough day. And none of the days got any easier, because it was either just frustration, or at one point when you knew that you weren't going to find anybody alive. The only thing that kept you going was that you wanted to try to find the missing people, so you could bring some kind of closure to their families. At least there was, they would have somebody to bury, or a part of somebody to bury, but that didn't happen that often. I mean, there was so many people that have never been found, or I guess they may still be going through DNA stuff, but you know, again, probably two of the most frustrating days of. Believe me, there was a lot of good days. I mean, I wouldn't have traded my career for anything. If I could do it again, I would do it again. You know, but those were two of the most frustrating days ever, and I'm sure for the department too.
Well, you know, before we get to the concluding segment, and I want to thank you for sharing that. I think, and I said this to someone who'll be coming on later in the month, that you know, my generation, I was 1 year old when this happened. So obviously, while this is going on, I'm in diapers. I don't have a clue, you know, and the world is changing, and how I'm going to grow up is changing before me. But I think it's good because my generation, I feel there's a lot of people that lack empathy. There's a lot of people that don't understand what you guys, first responders, or just people around New York that time went through that day and the days afterward. And so I want that perspective to be shared that way. The same way your generation has empathized with ours when we've had tragedies, not on the level of that, obviously, but moments that have affected us. You know, we have to do the same because that day changed and is continuing to change how life and society has progressed. Now, before, like I said, I get to the concluding segment, the members that I showed, we know how they died. But let's talk about how they lived, if you don't mind for a moment. So when you look back on the guys you work with Squad 288, great guys, what are some of the funnier memories that you could share of them?
Well, listen, they were all characters, each in their own right. They had great senses of humor. Some of them, I mean, I always, as a senior guy, I got, you know, probably more respect than I even deserved. But I got a lot of respect from them. But you know, there was certain like Brian Sweeney. You know, Brian I got along with great. He had a good sense of humor. But Brian was one of the young guys that would always try to get, you know, like tickle me a little bit. You know, like with some type of antics, or like. He would know, like we were doing the kitchen. If I had like my rock and roll on or something, I would walk out of the kitchen and he would put on like some headbanging music, you know, that because he knew that I would come back and be like, who put this on the radio, you know, and he would just sit there like, you know, no idea. But I mean, again, you know, just this was the stuff that, you know, a little cohesiveness. But, you know, like I say, they were all good young firemen. And then there was, you know, like the Ronnie Geis. Ronnie was my 24 partner. He was one of my best friends. A great dad. You know, he had 3 boys. He coached their little league teams. He worked with me on the side doing carpentry. He was, you know, an excellent carpenter. He was a great friend. I mean, he would give you the shirt off his back if I picked up the phone and said, Ronnie, I need this. You know, there was no questioning. It was just you got it. You know. Ronnie Kerwin, he was a fairly, you know, new lieutenant there. I didn't know Ronnie that well, but I knew that he was a volunteer in Levittown. He's, you know, he was a father, you know, seemed like a good dad, you know, talking to his children. I said, just being a volunteer fireman in this town, you know, as a guy that shows the type of guy he was. You know, you don't get anything for being a volunteer. You're just helping your community. So, you know, from the most junior guy to the most senior guy, they were all firemen's firemen. They were all gentlemen. And you know, you'd be proud to have them in your company, and you'd be proud to call them friend.
So, and I want to thank you for sharing their stories, because that's what it's about. You know, at the end of the day, you want to make sure that the memory is kept alive, and you know, with anybody, you know. And for those of you that may watch this later on, I do want to say that this special, which I will be splitting into 2 parts across Tuesday and Wednesday night, is going to be dedicated to the memories of the guys from Squad 288 and Rescue 1, everyone that from the FDNY that perished that day. But the guys in Squad 288, this goes out to you. Thanks for everything you did that day, and the families of those lost that day. You know, my heart goes out to you. So I want to conclude, and I've had such a great time talking with you. And I'm glad that you came on a segment called Rapid Fire. It's 5 hit and run questions from me, 5 answers from you. So you ready?
I hope so. I don't know how rapid my answer will be, but go ahead.
All right. First, if not, well, I know you said earlier that you would have been a police officer, but forget that for a moment. If not for the FDNY, what other career could you have seen yourself pursuing?
And he said, I can't say police officer. So, oh God, that's a tough one, Mike. I don't know. Probably construction.
Yeah, and that's what you worked in when you retired a little bit, So
I did construction safety, yeah. But my second job was construction. I wasn't a great carpenter or anything, but I have a pretty good knowledge of building construction. So I think I could have done something in the construction industry, and been pretty good at it.
Absolutely. Second, we're both Yankee fans. They are not going well this year, but nonetheless, give me your top 5 favorite Yankees of all time.
Of all time. Okay. Mickey Mantle. Mm-hmm. Okay. Even though he did, when you're young, you don't know about some of his off the field antics, which I've later learned about. But as a kid, all you know is this guy was an unbelievable outfielder and hitter. So, I still have my Mickey Mantle jersey. So I would have to say Mickey Mantle. I'm going to give you the 5 from the old days. And if you want 5, Mantle, Bobby Richardson, who was the second baseman, Elston Howard, the catcher, mm-hmm. Whitey Ford, and maybe Tom Tresh.
Okay.
Those are when I was a kid, those were my favorite Yankees. Now you want to know, or is that good enough answer?
No, if you want, I'm not strict. Go right ahead.
I don't know. Now, Derek Jeter obviously was a class guy and a fantastic player. Mm-hmm. Who else? Bernie Williams. Yeah. Now you got Aaron Judge, who has still been pretty steady, and he seems like a pretty classy guy. Andy Pettitte, great pitcher. And I don't know. Who else? I don't know. I guess there's a lot of ties for that 5th position, But.
Yeah, so that's fine. I'll give you my 5. I told this to my previous interviews. Also, a Yankee fan. Number 5. Speaking of guys with off the field issues, Alex Rodriguez. I did love the player. The off the field, but
that's true. Okay.
The player was fantastic. Hideki Matsui, number 4. Number 3, Derek Jeter, of course. Number 2, Mariano Rivera. And then number 1 would be Andy Pettitte, my favorite. It seems like every big game the Yankees had, and it's particularly in that 2009 run, Andy Pettitte was the guy that stepped up and always pitched exactly the kind of game that the Yankees needed in order to win.
Right. And I was remiss. I should have said Mariano, because he's still untouched today.
Yeah, greatest closer ever. Great. More men, for baseball fans out there, before Hank chimes in, more men have walked on the moon than have scored a run off Mariano Rivera in the postseason.
And you know what? When you see what's going on now, you appreciate what we had back then.
Yeah. The closers today, it's not even just Chapman. Closers today are definitely not what they used to be. It's not as locked down as it used to be. So third, favorite, after a long day of being a fireman in New York City, favorite bar or restaurant in the city to go to and unwind, have a nice meal, have a drink.
All right. Well, I wasn't a big unwinder. I was kind of like a family guy. I wanted to try to get home to the wife and kids back then.
Right.
If I had to pick one, there was a couple. Was it Restaurant Row on 47th Street there? Mm-hmm. There was a couple of Italian restaurants. I don't remember by name, but I do know I did have some pretty good meals on 47th Street, like often, like between 8th and 9th, at a couple of the Italian restaurants. They were in brownstones. Like you'd walk down the stairs, and but again, I don't remember their names. As far as the bar, we used to go down on the corner of Rescue One's on 43rd, 10th to 11th, and there was a bar on the corner of 10th and 43rd. Many years ago, it was Tea Bags, and then it was called, I don't even remember the name, but we would just go there because it was a half a block from the firehouse. You could go down there and, and just chat and have a couple of beers before you went home.
That's one of the things I miss most about the city. In a couple of weeks, actually, I'll be going down to the city for my first time since the coronavirus hit. Because there's a lot of great things about New York. I'm not that far away. I'm in New Haven, so I could just hop on the Amtrak and run right down. But man, the cuisine is just, and there's everything. If you like Spanish food, me being a Dominican guy, okay, you got that. If you like Italian food, which I like too, you got that. You got everything in New York. So second to last question, fourth, funniest call you ever responded to?
Funniest call. You know what? I'm not going to answer that because
it's fine.
Because the answers have to do with people saying things, and right now nothing would be politically correct, and I don't want to get you and me in trouble, so I can't. But those were the those are the funniest things.
That's fine. Don't worry. And you could say pass. I should have mentioned at the top with rapid fire. You could say pass if you don't want to answer a question. Fifth and finally, knowing what you know now, all the experience that you've had in 23 years. Let's say you got a young guy coming or gal coming in the academy now. He or she's getting ready to come on the job. When they're getting ready to graduate, what would you tell them?
Okay. You worked hard to get here. It's not, and this is nothing disparaging against the police department, but the police give the test every day of the week. You can walk in and give the test. Fire department is once every 4 years. So that test comes up and you have to work very hard to get near the top of that list, to be in a number that they're going to call you from. So you tell them you've worked very hard to get here. You're now in what I consider the best job in the world. Okay. You're not going to be rich, but it's fulfilling. You're going to make enough salary to raise a family, and you'll be able to go on a vacation each year. You're going to be able to help people, and people are going to look up to you. It's a very rewarding job. So you worked very hard to get here. You just went through the academy. When you get out into the field, pretty much keep your mouth closed. That doesn't mean you can't answer questions and stuff, but what you think you know, you don't. So keep your mouth closed when it should be closed. Your ears open to the right people, because in your firehouse, there's going to be 25 people and more with the officers. And there's going to be, you'll know after a short time who are the ones you want to listen to and who are the ones you have to listen to, but you can let it go in one ear and out the other. And then the ones that you want to listen to and absorb. So mouth closed when it should be, ears open and absorbing when you should. And if you do that, and the people that you listen to, then you follow them into the fires and learn your trade, you will become the type of firefighter that others later on will aspire to be.
That part about listening, my mom listens to this show. So for that part, she's going to love that about the listening part, because I can't tell you how many times through the years she's drilled. Tell your mom
she's doing the right thing by enforcing that.
No, of course. No. So shout out to mom. Mom, I know you're going to, I can already hear, see? Yeah, there you go. So on that note, that concludes what's been an amazing episode of the Mike Denham podcast. This will be volumes 3 and 4 of the Best of the Bravest, profiles of the FDN, interviews, I should say, with the FDNY's elite. Before we go, I want to just, again, thank you for coming on. I usually have the guests promote themselves and then I promote myself. Is there anything you want to plug? If so, fire away.
I don't need to promote myself, Mike, because like I said, I've been a fortunate guy, and I know you throw, and the guys throw around like the legends of the FDNY. Listen, just like hero, the word gets used way too easy. I don't consider myself a legend. I consider myself a fortunate person. I was fortunate to land on my feet in a job that I loved. Mm-hmm. I would do again if I could. Other than that, the only thing I'm here, if there's any young people that want to learn, I'm happy to impart any knowledge that I have of firefighting and, tactics and procedures to people that want to learn it. Other than that, I wish you good luck, because you're a young man that's obviously aspiring into the field that you want to make your career at. I think you're off to a good start, and I wish you the best of luck with that.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to give a shout out to my friends, Kevin Kugler and Louis Rufano of the Getting Salty podcast. Hopefully I can have them on someday. I know they're busy guys, but we'll see. Who knows? Maybe someday they can come on too. If you haven't subscribed to their show, not that they need me promoting them, they got a great audience, but go subscribe to them. Getting Salty experience on YouTube and everywhere else that you get your podcast. They get great guests. Hank's been on there a lot. And it's just a great show to listen to. Even if you're not in the fire service like me, just to learn and hear the great stories.
Just remember, you have those two guys on, my knucklehead buddies, as I call my probies. Anything good that they've learned, they learned from me, and anything bad, they picked up on their own. So
I'll be sure to mention that to Coobs or Loop. I can never get them on.
Senior dude said that.
I will. I'll text Coobs that actually when I'm done editing this later. So on my end, I'll promote myself and then we'll get out of here. If you have any, first of all, we are everywhere that you get your podcast. We are Apple, Spotify, wherever. We're also on YouTube, my YouTube channel, MC's Audio, MC''S, MC, of course, being my initials, Mike Colón, ''S audio for you, so you can get the video version of this podcast. I should name my channel MC's Video, but it's too late. So anyway, you get the point. If you have any sports related inquiries out there for those of you listening regarding a guest, or maybe you were a former athlete or somebody that does PR for a former athlete and you happen to stumble upon this, or if you're involved in the sports field as a writer, whatever, 917-727-0891. That is the sports business line. Email for that, Colón on Sports, COLON on Sports @gmail.com. For any other podcast related inquiries like an FDNY guest, an NYPD guest, news guest, or whatever the case may be, ring me up at 917-781-6189 or email me at the Colón Report, THECOLON report.com. Twitter, Mike in New Haven. Of course, there is LinkedIn, Mike Colón. Just type in Mike Colón, MIC''D, and you can find me there and connect with me. Instagram, original_MC1. And on that note, coming up on the Mike Colón podcast this Thursday, it's going to be a very interesting show. We're going to continue the miniseries Tales from the Boom Room, profiles of the NYPD's arson, explosion, and bomb squad. My friend Donald Sadawi, who did 16 years in the bomb squad from 1984 until his retirement in 2000, will join me for a deep dive into the 1996 crash of TWA Flight 800. So that's going to be a very good episode. And in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed these episodes and so on. With that being considered and said, on behalf of Hank Molle, the senior dude, I am Mike Colón, and we will see you next time. Take care, everyone.